Welcome to the Pursuing More podcast. We're here to encourage and empower people to pursue more of what God desires for them. For us, pursuing more is the intentional opposite of settling for less. In these podcasts, we're going to bring you stories and testimonies of people who are experiencing more of God and whose lives are being transformed from being complacent, frustrated, stuck, and settling for less, to experiencing hope, growth, change, and pursuing more of that in their lives.
Well, hello, I'm Bill Bowers, and I'll be the host for this episode. Today we have Michelle from Toronto, Canada with us, and God has been doing some exciting things in her life recently. And as we hear Michelle share her story today, I hope that you will be encouraged by what she's experiencing, but also to be encouraged to think about what God might desire for you and what's possible in your life as you pursue more. So with that, welcome, Michelle. Glad that you could join us here today. Love to have you just start out by sharing a little bit about yourself.
As you mentioned, I'm from Toronto, Canada, and I was born and raised here. I've lived here my whole life. I was born into a Catholic family, so I always grew up with some semblance of religion, but it was really, for me, Christianity was more of just, it was like a cultural thing growing up. Like, we'd go to church on holidays, and that was really like the crux of it. I wasn't really devout or anything. And then unfortunately, as I got a little older, I drifted from my faith. And then for a while, I didn't really have any kind of faith. And then about 4 or 5 years ago, I started to just re-question things and look at things a little differently. And I realized ultimately that something was just missing there, and I didn't know what it was at the time. So I've kind of been searching for it. And then I'd say like within the last 3 years, I've really started to come a lot closer to God again, and just to really come to learn what it means to be a Christian.
What is kind of that area that maybe you found yourself in, that area of challenge or frustration or defeat that was going on in that time in your life?
Yeah, I would say that a while ago, like part of the reason I drifted from my faith and that I didn't have as much of a relationship with God was because a part of me had trouble even just believing and having a close relationship with him. And I think a large part of that is that I was very closed off, both like with God and even with other people and myself even. And I was just very, very to myself. If I had an issue, I wouldn't really ask others about it. And I would kind of just try to suffer through things alone. And eventually I realized that wasn't a very feasible way of doing things. So I've started to just articulate myself more and to be more frank and honest with both myself, other people around me, and with God. And things have been a lot better ever since.
How was your relationship with God during that period of time, or was there one?
For a time, there wasn't really one at all. And then I'd say later, as I was slowly starting to wonder, okay, maybe there is something to this, I would kind of talk to God, but I was kind of just doing it out of obligation, or I even felt silly doing it. Am I just talking to nobody? Like, is there nothing really there? But then as I started to learn a little more about the faith and even just learn about how a lot of the Bible has historical accuracy to it, it kind of made me change my mind.
Was there kind of I don't know if you'd call it a tipping point, or people talk about hitting bottom or whatever, anything specifically that kind of helped you realize, like, I can't go on in this place of isolation?
In my case, I wouldn't say I hit rock bottom, although for a lot of people that could happen. Even though I had trouble believing for a while, what really also helped to change my mind, I think, was seeing how much happier and fulfilled and better off people that did believe and lived the faith were. Like, I kind of remembered thinking, okay, even if all of these people believe in things that I have a hard time believing, they seem to just be a lot better off for it. So if they were living a complete lie, it stands to reason that they wouldn't be so much happier and just fulfilled. So it kind of got me wondering. And for a time, I was just like, okay, even if I don't believe in everything, I think I share a lot of values with these people. So I started to just associate more with Christians because of that. And as I got talking to them, that was kind of what changed my mind too, once I actually started to talk to them and hear their side of it.
That's interesting. So it was, at some degree, it was seeing how they were experiencing life and how that was maybe different than you were experiencing life, and caused you to go check it out.
Yeah, exactly.
Were there other points along the way in the process that kind of helped you in opening up and honest with God or with others?
To give an example of a more recent event, like at this point, this only happened a few months ago, and the last year I've been pretty dedicated, and so I'd say out of that mindset by this point, but something interesting that happened even a few months ago when I was just trying to be less closed off, even within my own social circles, is I think I was actually talking to you one week and you had told me that while you were reflecting and praying, you had mentioned that you had thought that maybe God would want me to just share a little more, even with friends. And so later that week I did. And after I had shared a personal experience I had had with some close friends, a couple of other people had said that they had experienced something really similar. And we just started talking about it and we kind of realized like, oh, wow, we're not all alone in this. This has actually happened to a lot of other people. And it was just I'd say it was a very special moment just because we were all kind of able to be more open and honest with each other. And yeah, it's nice to feel that you're not alone. And by extension, I think my relationship with God even improved because I realized, oh, if I'm not alone in feeling this way, then just feeling less alone in general makes you think like, oh, God like hasn't abandoned me. Not that I had thought that he had abandoned me at that time and place, but it was kind of just a reminder.
Yeah, that's so good. Yeah, I think that being open is just so important all the way around with others and with God. And so what would you say is some of the change or growth that you've been experiencing kind of overall, maybe internally in your own mindset and perspective, and then maybe externally and how you're living that out?
I'd say like since I started being more open, I felt a lot better, like just not having like as much weighing me down and more confident and just more energy and happier overall. Since I've like allowed God into my life again, things just feel a lot better and also purposeful. Like at the point in my life where I didn't really believe in anything, and I guess I was more just agnostic. I was kind of just, I don't know, like there wasn't a grand purpose to anything. I had my morals and I had my values, but I didn't really know why I had them. And now that I have my faith, it's kind of like there's a reason for it and there's like a higher purpose. Yeah, it kind of reframes things in a good way.
Well, hey, as you've been growing and pursuing God and experiencing more, are there new challenges that you find yourself facing as you press into what God has for you in that relationship?
I don't know if I view it as a challenge because it's something that was always there, but I find as you grow closer in your faith with God, you'll notice older, like other things, like old habits that you used to do that when you first started, you maybe wouldn't have even seen it as a problem. I really do think that as you start to become closer to God, you become more spiritually aware too, which is a good thing. But then the challenge to that is you may have to give up a lot of old habits and things that you used to do that doesn't necessarily have to be an outright sin. Maybe in some cases it is, but a lot of the time they're just small little things that just don't help you in the long run. And cutting those things out and finding better ways to do things is a bit of a challenge, but it's a very rewarding challenge.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So many times, as like you said, as we're growing, we'll recognize these things that are hindering us, right? Because we're going where we've never been before. We're going deeper in relationship, deeper in our own transformation, and things that didn't used to matter now matter. And so being able to, to recognize that, and that's where I think, the Holy Spirit is so good at showing us those things and then giving us that discernment. Is this something that is hindering, my growth or my experience of this relationship with God? So yeah, I think that's an ongoing thing, right? The rest of our lives, we're going to be seeing those things, and God makes us aware, and then he helps us walk through those things. So how would you kind of summarize or articulate the change, right? Like the formation or the transformation that I went from this to this?
I'd say like a few years ago, I was a lot more unsure of myself and I had a lot of self-doubt. Wasn't really sure where I was going, or I didn't really have any higher sense of purpose. And today I'd say I have a lot more confidence and even just much better. I think I know myself a lot better too, like who I am, what I believe in, what I stand for, who I want to be, where I need to improve. It just gives me a very clear set path that I know I want to go towards. And it's just easier to define what my goals are and what I have to do to get there.
And how would you articulate your relationship with God right now?
Right now, I'd say I'm in a pretty good place. I actually am converting denominations from the one I was born into, and I've been going to a church for it, and I've been taking like weekly classes there, and it's been really good because I've been learning a lot more about the faith and even just God and studying the Bible in more depth. So I'd say I've been really coming to know him a lot better than I ever have. Like I said, growing up, I never really took the time to really learn these finer details aside from the generic, love your neighbor, which is important, but there's a lot more to it than that. So I'd say I'm really coming to know God and Christ, and even on a personal level, just what he wants for me.
One of the indicators we talk about is in relationship. Is it a distant relationship? He's far off. We make contact once in a while. Is it a casual relationship? Like I kind of bump into him at the coffee shop or at church once a week? Is it a a regular intentional relationship, right? Where I make time to meet with God and spend time with him? Or is it a intimate dependent relationship where it's, I can't live without it type of relationship? So like in those indicators, how would you describe where you are today and maybe versus where you were?
I'd say today I have a pretty strong relationship, like on a daily basis. Say I'm pretty connected to God, and I do have my ups and downs, and I'd be lying if I said I never had bad days. But
Sure.
even on those bad days, it's still like when I had bad days years ago, I would just and it would be the end of the world. And now it's kind of just, okay, this happened, but maybe there's a reason for it, or even if there's just not a reason for it, I'm just able to kind of put it into better perspective. And overall, I have a much better dialogue and open relationship with God.
So let me ask you this: what motivates you to continue pursuing more in your walk with God and your personal spiritual growth? What's the motivating factor now for you?
For me, I think it's just how far I have come, and thinking to myself, if I was able to come this far now and I continue to do this, like in another 5 years, I'll be even better off than I think possible now. So just realizing that endless potential for growth and communion with God, and just a really exciting thing, even just in your everyday life. Like it affects all areas of your life, not only spiritually, but career, relationships, and everything. And realizing that there's so much more to be gained and wanting more of it, because I finally gotten a taste for it. Like, oh, this is how it is and this is how it can be. And why would I want to stop?
That's great. Yeah. Why would we stop? Yeah. I think that's so true. Once we begin to taste what God has and what he desires for us and in us and through us, and it's like, we just want more.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of in closing, how would you encourage others who might feel maybe frustrated or stuck or defeated and sense that they've been settling for less? How would you encourage them?
I would say, I know it's very cliche, but I would say to remember that there always is hope and it can get better, as much as it may not feel like it in the moment. And even if things really are bad in the moment, I would say just pray and maybe do your best to find like a small thing you can do to improve your situation. And even if it won't undo a lot of the bad things, just focusing on the small details every day and tweaking those things can make a big difference too. So yeah, I'd say just focus on everything that's within your control, and whatever is not, just leave it up to God and to have faith.
Amen. Have faith is choosing to believe that yes, God can make a difference. Just because we've been this way for so long doesn't mean we have to stay this way.
Any closing comments, Michelle?
I would just say that just taking the time to really have a personal relationship with God has been really helpful for me. And I think it can help a lot of other people too. And like I said before, just to be honest with yourself first and foremost. And once you're able to do that, you can be honest with others and God and everyone and everything. And it's the key to improving things.
Yeah. Well, hey, thanks, Michelle, for sharing with us. Really, really appreciate your story, and that it's an ongoing story. And I love that we get the chance to stay in relationship, and I get to kind of watch what God is doing in your life. And just want to encourage you with your own words, right? To keep believing, keep pressing in and experiencing more of what God has for you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you for listening to the Pursuing More podcast. We hope you've been encouraged through this episode, and if you're curious about other resources that Pursuing More offers, you can find it at pursuingmore-nw.com.